Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. Welcome to another episode of Legends of the Spire. Today on the podcast we've got Jamie Winter with us. He was a feature of the Chesterfield team in the late noughties when Lee Richardson was at the helm. And with all players from that era, it's really interesting to talk to them about that squad at the time, because it was a squad that had all the talent to win promotion but just missed out on playoffs in both seasons that Lee Richardson was in charge. So it was good to talk to him about that. It was also a really good tribute to Kevin Austin as well, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. So thanks for Jamie Winter for speaking to us about big Kevin Austin. And yeah, we had to chat about local derbies against Mansfield and square sausages with Gregor Robertson, and his time before Chesterfield at places like Leeds, Aberdeen and St Johnstone too. He's now a patron of Back On Side, which is a mental health charity. So do go to backonside.co.uk to check it out. It's a really good website and well worth seeing what they're doing. So thanks for Jamie Winter for spending some time with us. Top fella. Could have chatted to him all day. Speaks really well about the game. And yeah, best of luck to him up in Dundee with whatever he gets up to next. So here's our latest episode of Legends of the Spire with Jamie Winter. Where are you zooming from?
So I'm in my house in Dundee now, back home from where I was born. Yeah. So managed to. I've been living back home now for about since I was 25, 26, so yeah, about 10 years now. So yeah, it's been good.
And I've never been to Dundee. I applied for a job once at Dundee Arts Centre many years ago, and I was all fully prepared to move to Dundee if I got the job because it looked really nice. You're a bit of a.
To be honest, it's very, very similar to Chesterfield in size and people and whatnot. So that was good transition. But it's we just recently got the V&A up here, so that's been a big thing for the art side of things. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I suppose it's like everything else. We take it for granted because we're from here.
Yeah.
Whenever we go on holiday, people always say we're bumping into Americans with the golf, and you're only 5 minutes from St Andrews, and we kind of say, yeah, it's just over the water, but we don't take much notice of it.
So if we start at the beginning, I always like to start at the start. Obviously, growing up in Dundee.
Yeah.
So were you always football mad? Was that always your sport?
Yeah. So my dad played for like Forfar and a few junior teams. He was at St Johnstone and that as a kid. So it was the ritual was obviously school and then dragged to my dad's football on a Saturday, which was great. And it's kind of all I knew was hanging about dressing rooms and beginning to watch football from a really young age, and to be honest, genuinely took a real interest in it quite early. It wasn't until I started following, like supporting teams myself, that then my dad gave up the football and we became season ticket holders at Ibrox.
Yeah,
and then that kind of coincided with the time we had. That was then the time when I was becoming quite good, the 12, 13-year-old stage. So I was missing out on going to the football. My dad was doing that. So just from there, as I say, playing in Dundee, because there was a lot of training schools, it would be like Monday Dundee United, Tuesday Aberdeen, Wednesday I would train with Celtic, Thursday through to Glasgow to train with Rangers. So it was quite, from the age of maybe 11 or 12, that was me all the way through to 15 till I decided what I was doing next.
Yeah. So you're a Rangers fan then growing up, were you?
Yeah, so brought up a Rangers fan. Yeah, so it's been a good season for me so far. Not so good the past 9. It was tough to put up with, but yeah, that's so. My dad was best friends with Derek Johnson's, who's obviously a Rangers legend. His brother, they were at school together. So everybody always says, being from Dundee, how did you end up a Rangers fan? But you always just follow who your dad supports, I suppose. So
yeah.
Kind of put into me.
And then, were you part of a specific team's youth system when growing up, or were you going all over the place?
So in Scotland, there's what they call an S forum, and that kind of ties you to a club at that age. And I was with Rangers as a youth player, but I was going on trial down at England to Leicester, Everton, been down to Middlesbrough and Leeds. And as soon as I kind of knew that it was going to be the English route I was going to take, my dad took us out of Rangers, because I was travelling 2 and 3 times a week through to Glasgow from Dundee, which is an hour and a half, 2-hour drive at the time. It just seemed pointless. It was probably affecting the schooling and stuff. So once I kind of made up my mind I was going to go down the England road, he just pulled me back, played with my friends for the last 7-8 months, and then obviously made my mind up that I was going to go to Leeds.
Yeah. And what age did you turn up at Leeds then?
So I signed for Leeds when I was 15, and they actually took me out of school and just before my 16th birthday, and I had to finish my academic work down in Leeds. So yeah, it was quite tough moving away from home that early. But it was kind of when you've got a dream and you're going for it. That was the kind of way I went.
Yeah. Well, I live in Leeds, so I'm zooming from Leeds. So it's quite
Brilliant.
But so what were you in, like, digs then, or were you?
Yeah.
Like,
So the way they did it at that time was you'll know Thorpe Arch was the training ground, and on the training ground there was I say dorms. It was like, so first years when you joined would stay on the bottom level, and then in your second year you move up to the stairs and stay on the top level, and then in your third and fourth year you would move out and stay with a family. Mm-hmm. And it was just good. It was a good bedding in stage because on the training ground your meals and that were cooked for you, and it made it comfortable for guys moving away from home. And by the time you got upstairs you were a wee bit older, you were wanting a wee bit more freedom, you were getting a taxi into town and want to go to the coffee shop or whatever it was. But so it was good. So I stayed at Thorpe Arch for 2 years, and yeah, but probably would have changed it. Took it for granted, to be fair, because there was not like having Olympic-sized swimming pools and all the gym stuff and all that on your doorstep, but never used it. You couldn't wait to go off the training ground and go and play the computer with the boys.
And are there any players from around then that we'd kind of know?
Yeah, so in my second year when we moved upstairs, below me was Scott Carson and James Milner. They were 2 roommates. So they stayed below us, and like that we lived together for a year and a half. To be fair, all I did was watch Only Fools and Horses. Anytime we went, like, obviously, could you imagine 20, 25 boys all staying in dorms? We were having a carry on, and all they were doing was in the dorm watching Only Fools and Horses or playing darts. And but then I suppose that's how they've got Champions League medals, isn't it?
Yeah, so it is. Like, James Milner's got this reputation of that he plays on a bit of being boring. But so was Only Fools and Horses his choice?
Yeah, no, like that. I think he does play on it because he was always a great lad when we were younger. Like, he was very, very focused from a young age. He kind of missed the whole youth system. I remember him joining, and within months he was in the reserves, and then within months of being in the reserves he was right in the first team. But you could tell from a young age, like, as I say, he was so determined, and he was just good, consistently good at everything. I mean, like, I felt that when I was a good passer of the ball. So, but I wasn't the quickest, or I wasn't mobile in the park, whereas James was just good at everything. You could play him left back and he would be an 8 and a 9 out of 10, the same way you could play him right wing and he'd be an 8 and a 9 out of 10. He was able to float about the game and contribute to a game of football in every way he could. So as I say, I didn't have many times playing with him in the youth system because he just shot through, and within months he was in the first team.
Yeah. And then were you there for kind of were you there until you were about 20, something?
Yeah, so I actually came home for Christmas. I remember Kevin Blackwell was the manager. It was the first season they'd been relegated to the Championship. And it was me, Martin Woods, and a guy, Andy Keogh. Us 3 were kind of told we had to stay back for an extra week training with the first team. And we were kind of pulled aside and says, we're playing Sunderland on Boxing Day. And they said, 1 year or 2 years I'll need to come in the squad. And it just so happened that I think Woodsy went with the squad, and me and Andy got to go home for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And while I was up for Christmas, I remember it was like Christmas Eve, the club were phoning my phone, and I was like, oh, I'm not answering it. Like, they're just wanting me to go down and sit on the bench at Sunderland. It's a terrible attitude, you know. Like, when I think about it now, it's like shocking. Like, kids would give the right arm. But I remember being back home for Christmas with my family and thinking, oh, like, I don't want to go. And eventually my dad got a hold that heard they were phoning me, and he was like, you better phone them back, like, now. And it just so happened that they'd accepted an offer from Aberdeen. And while I was up there, just to go up and have talks with them. And the way it worked out, I went up the next day to Aberdeen, and within 2 or 3 days I'd signed. And it wasn't until then the summer I had to go back and collect all my clothes from Leeds, because the Scottish Premiership was in full swing then.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's a great shot of your free kick versus Celtic, which I suppose as a Rangers fan was nice. How was it at Aberdeen going to that?
Enjoyed it. Again, really enjoyed it. It was my first real taste of I'd obviously been in and around the bench and the squad at Leeds, but then to play actual proper football, it was special. It was a lot different to what I'd been used to. The switch from seeing the Premiership to the Championship and then back up to the SPL. It's all of a sudden 3 points matter on a Saturday, and it really matters, and it matters to people. So it was a bit of an eye opener, but it was something that I enjoyed. And to be fair, I was quite, I would say, laid back, but I cared, but I cared in a way that I didn't let things affect me too much. But the time from joining at Christmas to the end of the season was probably my most enjoyable at Aberdeen, because I was involved in every game, and we put on a run of games where I think we managed to just missed out on European football the last game of the season on goal difference. But no, it was good. It was nice to be back home, nearer, closer to the family.
Yeah, and quite a few players have mentioned that going from kind of a reserve team setup to then a first team, there's like a noticeable change in how much it matters straight away, because maybe in a reserve team you're a bit more selfish and you're trying to impress.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, they'll say that the result matters, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. You can have, as long as you're doing your job in a reserve game, you'll walk away and say, well, we got beat 3-0 today, but I'll be picked for the first team on Saturday to be in the squad or whatnot. Whereas it really matters on a Saturday when there's 3 points up for grabs, or you're fighting relegation, or you're chasing a European spot. It becomes serious.
Yeah. And what was your highlight at Aberdeen then? Was it scoring that free kick?
Yeah, I think stating the obvious. I mean, I think I scored two for Aberdeen. I scored a good goal in the Scottish Cup against Berwick, which was it was a long range one. It's probably one of the better ones. But just the whole week leading up to the Celtic game, I remember training really well, and the manager pulling me in on the game was on the Sunday live on the telly, and remember he pulled me in on the Saturday and says, I was really contemplating starting you. And I thought it was one of the ones like, yeah, good one, thanks very much type thing. And he was like, I'm genuinely serious. I was going to start you and I was going to play you sweeper. Now, I've always been a centre midfielder all my days, but my manager at that time was Jimmy Calderwood, and he'd learned all these coaching badges in Holland. So he had this whole philosophy of, we've got a lot of Dutch training and everything is, so I don't know, but the Sunday, Russell Anderson, our captain, who was this predominantly centre half, he pulled out with a migraine at literally 2 hours before kickoff. And true to his word, he put me in and played sweeper. And it was myself, Andy Considine, and a guy, Xander Diamond. And I mean, I think I was 19, Xander was 19, and Andy Considine was 18. And we were up against John Hartson and Zaravsky. So it was a bit of an eye-opener. But I remember scoring the goal and running back thinking, I can't believe I've got the winner against Celtic. And within about 7 minutes, it was 3-1.
Is there to be a variation here? Nicholson over the ball. It could be knocked short for Winter, who's got a very good strike with his right foot. Or will it be Smith? It's going to be Winter. Oh, it's brilliant! Jamie Winter for Aberdeen!
I mean, that's a bit of it's a bit of a baptism of fire, isn't it? Getting chucked in a sweeper against Celtic.
Yeah, and to be fair, my brother-in-law, he still tells us a funny story about that. He remembers he was watching it live on Satanta, and they were kind of doing a run through of the game and talking about how nervous I'll be being 20-year-old thrown in at sweeper. And I think it cut to me in the warm-up, and I was just kind of messing about, like no care in the world. I think now if you ask me to go and play sweeper in a game, I'd probably be a nervous wreck. But when you're 20-year-old, you just take it as you go, don't you?
Yeah, and is the quality? Is there a really noticeable difference in quality from those like top couple of teams, and then
you just there's no room for error whatsoever. I mean, even now, if I've watched back the highlights of that game, there's so many times I'll say I could have done that better, or I could have done that, and it affects the whole game. You're talking about, Nakamura and Petrov, they're playing, and you just they capitalise on any mistake, and that even something stupid like you think that you give away a corner, and then all of a sudden they've just got you penned in for the next 15 minutes, and it just affects the whole flow of the game. from one mistake, or you've given away a possession at a cheap throw-in. And like I say, these are all internationals. They just really punish you and they make you pay for it.
Yeah. And then you had a spell at St Johnstone, didn't you, before ending up at Chesterfield?
Yeah. So again, the manager had come to me, and this was the next season, and I was kind of not playing as much as I'd wanted to be playing. He'd made a few signings in midfield, which was fine. And I kind of just said I wanted to be playing. So he came to me and says there's 2 or 3 clubs, and it turned out to be St Johnstone. Owen Coyle was manager there, and they were first division, but they were pushing for promotion with St Mirren, which again, it was good, and it was going out and getting more games. But timing was everything in football, and I was a wee bit gutted because when I did go to St Johnstone, I was playing, but it just so happens that the 2 or 3 boys that were in my position at Aberdeen got injured, and there was guys that were in the reserves with me were then playing, and I thought, if I'd maybe just stuck it out, who knows what would have happened. But they're the decisions you make. But no, enjoying my time at St Johnstone, and again, it was just a chance to play football.
Yeah, and then yeah, eventually you end up at Chesterfield, don't you? So
yeah.
How did that all come about?
So I'd finished my contract at Aberdeen. I'd run that down, and my roommate at Leeds at the time, Martin Woods, had basically just signed for Doncaster, and he'd said to me that they were keen on having a look, kind of like a trial basis, come down and train, and you get to look at them, they'll get to look at you. So I thought, yeah, no problem. So went down to Doncaster, and I think I was there 2 or 3 weeks, played a couple of games, and I remember we played Man City at the Keepmoat on the Saturday, and I spoke to them, and they says, look, done really well, we're keen to possibly get something sorted. Go up the road, and my daughter had just been born. She says, go up, see the family, and then we'll be in touch. No problem. I went back up the road, and basically the next day I was in the town with my daughter, and Lee Richardson phoned us. I got a number on my phone that I didn't have. He introduced himself. I'd obviously heard of him through the ex-Aberdeen stuff, and he kind of just sold the club, and the deal was basically done over the phone. And I travelled down basically the next Saturday, and it was a testimonial game against Nottingham Forest. Was it Blatherwick's testimonial, I think it was?
Yeah, I think it was Blathers, yeah.
And I actually signed that morning and came back up the road to get the rest of my stuff, and that was it. It was just done.
Yeah, and then that's a lot of players kind of have their bases and commute, don't they? And but I suppose that's not really possible when you Scotland.
No, and I mean, and I didn't drive at the time, which was how I've managed it, I don't know. So basically, when I moved to Chesterfield, I had to try and find the closest flat to the stadium as possible, or find out where other boys were living so I could jump a lift. But yeah, so it was a case of just moved down, and that was it. Went with it, but I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, and what did Richardson say what kind of role he wanted you to be in the team?
Yeah, kind of just said that they were just relegated, and he made a big deal about the fact that they'd obviously managed to sign Jack Lester, who had heard a lot about, came with a bit of a reputation, and for him to come to League Two at the time was a big deal. But says we're needing ammunition, we're needing a ball player to come in here, keep possession of the ball, and do the kind of bits. He told me that we've got someone next to you in Derek Niven who'll do all the running for you. and we'll get you on the ball and play. And he was good, to be fair. And like I say, just was really excited to get back to playing proper football again.
Yeah, and you had quite a few fellow Scots in that squad, didn't you? There was like you and like Derek Niven, Gregor Robertson, I think signed probably that same season, maybe. Or around that time. And yeah, so you had quite a contingent, didn't you, at that time? Yeah,
and I was in the hotel. I hadn't quite got a house yet, and he's my best friend in football and away, Peter Leven. He gives me a phone, and then that's it. He's signing as well. So that was the icing on the cake, and we couldn't wait to get going.
Yeah, and just to go off on a tangent for a bit at the moment, Peter Leven's in Russia now, isn't he?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So he's a traveller. He was in Brest with I don't even know. But the manager there is now manager of a team in Russia, and they're second in the league. They're going for promotion. There's only like 7 or 8 games left, and they've already made the playoffs. But I think they can get automatic promotion, and that'll be him. He'll be in the league with your Zenit St. Peterburgs. And I was on the FaceTime to him just the other day because I'd not spoke to him for a while. And while we were chatting, Jamie Ward called him. So next minute he was in the chat. So it was like me, him and Wardy having a blather again like old times.
Jamie Ward's not going to Russia, is he? To play
well, no, I think he's trying to get anywhere. I don't know where he was. I don't know if he's trying to go to Russia, but there was talking maybe a move someplace, but I'm not entirely sure where.
And yeah, the next question that was on my list was which players were you closest to at that time? So I suppose we've probably already answered it, but which players were that you kind of felt that you had an instant connection with?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, me and Ped, we'd known each other for a number of years coming through at Rangers and then playing against one another in Scotland. So we were obviously good friends. But we pal about away from football and all that. And all the area where we stayed, Wardy stayed in the same area, Big Fletch. This was all the first year. Because obviously in my second year, Ped abandoned us and moved on to MK Dons.
Yeah.
And then Wardy only lasted till like the January and he moved to Sheffield United. I think Fletch had moved on as well. And then by the second year, I become really good friends with like Darren Curry, Kevin Austin, Pagey. Like they were all top lads. Downsy. Like to be fair, we were all a good group of guys. The travellers from Nottingham, like Jack, Gregor Robertson, Roche, they would kind of stick together purely because they'd grown up through the ranks and travelled up together. But there was nobody in that dressing room, put it that way, that I didn't enjoy their company. Even Big Janos, guys like that who we didn't have much in common away from football, but you would sit and have a chat and a beer and it'd be no problem at all.
Yeah, and we should mention about Kevin Austin because he sadly passed away, didn't he, in 2018, I think, from pancreatic cancer. Do you want to say a few words about what he was like?
He was just honestly like gentle giant. He was one of the guys that if you kind of had to know him to understand him. Like he was the most soft, kind-hearted person I could probably say I've met in the dressing room. He would literally do anything for anyone. But when he stepped over that white line, he's the exact polar opposite. He was so aggressive and the person that you would want in the trenches with you. And I mean, I remember when I left Chesterfield, through whatever reason, everybody moves their own ways and you lost touch with people. But Kev was one of the very few that you would always get a text at Christmas time or coming up to your birthday. He would know, I know it's your birthday, I hope you're keeping well, I hope the family's well. He was just honestly an absolute gent. And it was sad, very sad, and when we got the news, and it's like everything else, a group chat was started and it was, we'll have to meet up and we'll have to catch up because these things, it shouldn't take something like this for everybody to stay in touch. And as I say, we're all devastated and there's just such a shame on his family.
Yeah, absolutely. So you made your debut, I think it was against Chester, and you had the first yellow card in the league that year.
Did I?
I think you were booked after 9 minutes, and it was the first yellow card in English League football that year. Do you remember? Was it a harsh yellow? I've not got footage of it, but
do you know what? I remember that day. It was absolutely scorching. I remember it being a really, really hot day, and my mum and dad had travelled down for the game. So I remember being really uptight and like needing to make an impression. And the guy I was playing against is Mark Hughes, and he played against him growing up. I'm sure he was at Spurs as a youth, so he was the same age as me. And I thought, like, I'll put a mark on here. And to be fair, I think I've got a still picture I'm sure I've been sent a still picture, and it's the two of us going for the ball, and he's trying to go over the top of the ball for me, and it just so happens I was a wee bit cleverer and went way over the top and caught him. But yeah, I didn't know that was the first yellow card, but I remember it being early because I remember thinking, oh God, here we go.
Do you, because usually referees don't like to give yellow cards that early, do they? So as a player, do you kind of take advantage of that a bit and like you say, try and lay one on someone in the first minutes of the game? Especially
League Two level, I think 100%. It used to happen to us all the time. We would see it near enough every week. In the first 10 minutes, without fail, Jack or Wardy were getting either a centre half right through the back of them with a header. And like you say, a ref would 9 times out of 10 be like, that's your warning, that's it. And defenders and midfielders would use that to the advantage all the time. You'd see it all the time. We had Kev Gray. We ended up having to wear shin guards in training because of how wild he was. It was absolute madness. Rico actually had to stop training one day and say, like, that's enough. And we're all wearing shin guards in training. You've never seen anything like it. Like full blown, it was brilliant. The competitiveness was great, but you were just, got a game on Saturday, Kev, come on.
And I imagine there was a few players like that in that squad at the time. I imagine people like Derek Niven were a bit of a monster in training as well, weren't they?
Yeah, like it's one of the, like, you've obviously had Neville, Downsy, Gregor could handle himself, Pix was a wee terrier. We wouldn't want a 50-50 with Pix. To be fair, there wasn't many that couldn't really handle themselves in that team. So yeah, no, definitely, like, on that department, we're okay.
Yeah, and what was the people always ask, or people always muse about the difference in quality in terms of Scottish and English league, and where kind of a League Two would fit in terms of the Scottish league setup. But did you notice like a difference in quality or standard going from kind of St Johnstone to Chesterfield?
I found League Two harder than the SPL. It was just 100 mile an hour. You didn't get a minute on the ball. And bear in mind, in my first season, we had like MK Dons, Peterborough, spending big money. Some internationals then in their team. They were good sides. But as I say, you didn't get a minute on the ball. You're going from playing an SPL game where you can take it from the full back, you can turn and switch play. That was never happening in League Two. If you received a pass from any of the defenders, you've got somebody right up your back, and they're making you sure you know that they're there. So that was a bit of a, not a culture shock as such, because I knew what to expect. But when people do ask the difference between SPL and League Two, as it says, SPL for me anyway, I found that easier to play football in. League Two was harder. And
I suppose, especially in your position where you're trying to get on the ball, play a pass, I'm guessing that's you're having to react a hell of a lot quicker.
We played, I'm sure my first actual game for Chesterfield was I remember it being like a pre-season friendly. It was a night game, and as I say, taking it from the back, playing out, thought this is fine, going to really play, and then going from that to Chester, and you just literally helping everything on and making sure you don't get caught on the ball, because that's one thing you don't want to do. When Jack Lester's in your team, you do not want to get caught on the ball because he's letting you know.
And the firepower in that team, over those 2 years, you obviously had Jack Lester and Jamie Ward and Steve Fletcher and Adam Rooney, I think, joined maybe a second team as well. So are they kind of priming you in training and stuff in terms of, right, this is what I want you to do?
Yeah, all the time. I remember Lee Richardson doing a drill as such, and the whole session, not the whole session, but the whole drill basically revolved around me feeding, or the centre midfielder feeding balls into the strikers, and they're just shooting a goal, and we've spent the best part of 40 minutes just two doggies running up and down, and I'm turning to Neville and I'm going, I'm piped. What's going on here? What are these hitting them? We're not getting a shot at goal. We're just getting it here off Downsy and laying it for them. But he's got about 6 lungs, so he's loving it. He's just running back and forward. But no, but we're fortunate having the strikers we did.
We've had a few players on from that era. We've had kind of Downsy on, and I spoke to Jamie Lowry as well, and we've had Alan O'Hare as well. And they all have different opinions of Lee Richardson. It seems like, and it was a time when Roy McFarland had been there for ages, and it was a really kind of stable setup for years, and you could pick the first 11. And then there was obviously that transitionary period where Lee Richardson was manager for a couple of years, which was when he was obviously there. And it seems that he maybe brought in some methods or some ideas that maybe rubbed some of the players up a bit the wrong way.
Yeah.
Fair to say. I imagine because he signed you, you were probably really got on well with him.
I mean, I got on well with him, but I would, out of most of them, me and Ped especially, we were probably the two that fell out with him the most. We kind of had the Gallus Scottish mentality of if we didn't agree with someone, we would tell him. I mean, what we had when you had Nelly, who was assistant, who was an unbelievable coach. Like, his training sessions were amazing, really, really good. Really took his time to improve players. You had a fitness coach in Shinner, who was, for me, the best there ever is. Like, unbelievable person. Love him to bits. And everybody wanted to feed off that. And it was like Rico, he tried too hard to be this manager that maybe he even wasn't. I mean, every day there used to be a team meeting. And you know yourself, if a boss is just speaking, we would be training in Sheffield and he'd be saying, right, meeting back at Chesterfield. So you have everybody travelling from there back to Chesterfield. We'd get in the home dressing room thinking, right, something's going on here. And it would basically just be a nothing meeting. Is everybody okay? A meeting that he could have held 25 miles away. And I just think it got very repetitive, and I think quickly boys just started to switch off. And when he spoke, it became very repetitive. And it's hard because I think he had the right, he wanted to be good and he wanted to be right. He was very much into this whole psychology of football. And sometimes it affected me. Like, he would try and do it the wrong way. Like, he would maybe say things, oh, you're not playing, and then he would play you. And he would tell you you're in the squad and then you're not in the squad. Very mind game orientated. But I suppose, like you say, I can't have many grumbles with him because he did bring me into the club, but I could totally sympathise. We used to fall out all the time. All the time.
Yeah. It's interesting that, because it's starting to, I don't know any footballers. I know quite a few now because I've been doing this, but it seems like a lot of players say exactly the same thing with him in terms of, was he just not, because obviously he's done really well since his kind of doing things with Klopp and stuff like that, I mean, but was he just not a manager? Yeah,
I think that's probably the problem. I think he knew his football, obviously played at a very high level, and he was a lovely guy. Like, he wasn't a nasty person. He wasn't. I just think at that time he maybe got caught up on the whole psychology of things, rather than probably just letting Nelly coach and let him step back and watch from afar, and then deal with being a manager. It was like he tried to do everything. And kind of maybe just got involved too much, and sometimes you were just, as I say, the whole meeting things just used to rub boys up the wrong way, and and it was unfortunate because that's one of the things in football. As I look back and I think, with the squads that we had in the both years that I was there, I mean, I look at the leagues and the first season we were there, Peterborough, MK Dons, and Hereford went up, and we beat all three. We battered Hereford 4-0 on Sky. We beat Peterborough down there, and we beat MK Dons down there, and they coasted the league. And I think, if we'd have just had a bit of consistency, we really, really could have had a proper go.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions, actually, because obviously in those two seasons, finished just outside the playoffs both seasons, and I think Jack Lester in his first season with us had something like the third highest strike rate in Europe or something. I think he was like behind Torres or something that season. So was this one thing that you think you could put your finger on in terms of why we just couldn't get to that?
I think we lacked putting a run together. It always seemed that if there was a team that could put 5-6 winning streak together, you would jump up 5-6 spaces. Our problem was never playing the teams that were at the top end of the table. We seemed to drop too many points. Drawing away to Accrington 1-1 at Christmas deflates you. I mean, Exeter went up the year when we went down there and gave them 6, and I'm pretty sure that was the first time they'd been beat that season. I think they were undefeated when we went down there, and we gave them 6, and we played them off the park. I think we lacked belief, which is probably hard to understand because of the squad that we had. But again, maybe that does come from above. Maybe you need a manager to put that belief into the players, because, as I say, the squad we had, the players that we had, it's the one thing I look back and think, the teams that went up, we were better than them.
Yeah. And final thing on the whole Richardson manager thing, but would it have been, in hindsight, would it have been better if Mill was the manager and Richardson was the number 2? No way.
Possibly. I do remember there was a stage where I think Richardson's wife took not well, and she was away, and he was away from the club for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, which was obviously concerning for everyone because obviously his wife's health was important. But I just remember the first game, it was Boxing Day, we played Bury away, we won 1-0, and I'm sure we went on that was the first time we'd won like 3 or 4 games on the bounce, and Nilly was in charge. And that, obviously, naturally, you're going to think the question that you're asking, God, I wonder if the tables had been reversed and you had Nilly at the helm and Rico maybe taking things a step back. But yeah, in hindsight, you'll never know, I suppose. But just you couldn't really put your finger on it, but there was just something. I mean, he never managed again after Chesterfield, did he?
No.
So it's unfortunate because he really inherited. And to be fair to him, he also brought in really good players, managing to recruit Big Fletch and Jack and Darren Curry. I mean, Darren Curry, what a player. So being able to recruit these boys, Pagey and Kevin Austin, you can't argue with that. But there was just something missing. There was just that final bit of something to make you the team that goes there.
Yeah. And then what I really wanted to talk about was the Mansfield derby, because you played in 3, I think.
Yeah.
So you played in 2 the first season, and then that was the season they got relegated. And then the second season was FA Cup. So I've always wondered in terms of when you have a big fierce derby like that, and obviously it goes back to a political time about pit strikes and things like that. And obviously you've come from Scotland.
Yeah.
So you probably don't know the importance of why something is important or why the fans are so passionate about it and things like that. So as players, do you take time or do you sit down in the dressing room and kind of have a bit of a history lesson in terms of why it's important to find out?
Yeah, pretty much. You had, at the time, physio was Jamie Hewitt. You had Shinner, Barry Roach, all these guys who had been there, Alan O'Hare, like you say, Downsy. They were all very, very quick to I mean, obviously every game was important, but they were quick to remind you just of the this one's a little bit more important. This one just means that wee bit more. And like you say, probably the England's coming from Scotland. You take it on board. Yeah, okay. And then our first one was away, and I remember coming out the warm up, and there was like 4,000 or 5,000 Chesterfield fans in for the warm up, and the place was rocking. And I remember going, "Oh, this is why you play football. This is what it's all about." And unfortunately, I remember I had an absolute nightmare that day. But we won 3-1, and it was just amazing. And it was like, couldn't wait for the next one. But you are very much reminded through the club, through everyone. Jim Brown, you'd be in training, and Jim Brown would be telling you, remember, you know who we've got on Saturday. You know who we've got on Saturday. Just constant wee reminders and wee digs. You'd go down to Linda's sandwich shop for your lunch, and they'd be telling you, just remember, all the best on Saturday. Remember it was 3 points, but come on, it's against them. Just wee reminders all the time. And that was just like, okay, this one's a wee bit more special than the rest.
And you usually find that the local derbies like that get a bit tasty in terms of a few challengers flying in or things like that. Is that because you kind of make an effort to try and give the crowd something to shout about? Or is it the crowd, the atmosphere from the crowd, that just makes you a bit more full-blooded with things?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you, because when you know yourself, when you're playing in it's a full-packed stadium, you get that adrenaline, and you're quicker at that yard, stuff like that. But also, when you were talking about a game like against Mansfield, when you've played your game the previous Saturday, you have a wind down on the Sunday and training on the Monday. It's not till probably about the Tuesday, Wednesday, you start really focusing and starting to think about who we're playing on Saturday. But when you know Mansfield's the following Saturday, basically as soon as that final whistle goes the Saturday before, all focus for that whole week, the boys would be texting Mansfield, who did they score today, or who were they playing? He's been booked, I'm going to do him, and make sure we get the better of that player. And it's always just the whole week built up towards that. And it's amazing. You can't beat it.
Yeah. And how does it measure up to a Celtic Rangers local derby?
Well, I've never played in a Celtic Rangers game. I've only ever been there as a fan.
Yeah, you've been there as a fan.
I could totally obviously understand the political. Up here, we've obviously got the religious side of things, which makes it very very heated and whatnot. But it would be interesting to see if you could fill a 50,000 seater stadium for a Chesterfield Mansfield game. I don't think it'd be that far off. Obviously, the numbers give it a bit of an advantage, but I could certainly imagine that it'd be just as loud, possibly.
and yeah, you had 100% record, didn't you, at in derbies? So
never got beat, so I was laughing. Perfect.
And I should mention that we're obviously jumping forward into the second season, but you scored twice in the FA Cup game, of which we've spoken to Alan O'Hare, and he was playing for Mansfield that day.
So strange.
And he said it was kind of his chance to say goodbye to Chesterfield fans a bit, because he'd not left the club the way he wanted to. And you scored a couple of really good goals in that match. So, do you remember those? Do you remember those goals?
Yeah. As I said, it was when it's special when it's the FA Cup. That's normally a special time anyway. You look forward to the FA Cup weekend and blah blah blah. The fact that it's then Mansfield, because I think had they been, they weren't in the league that time. They'd been relegated.
Yeah.
So the fact that then we'd managed to get another derby game at home as well was brilliant. And then obviously to nick a couple of goals. I remember Lloyd Kerry having a goal, because it was kind of roles reversed. I'd had to be the one that done all the sitting and keep possession of the ball, and Lloyd was always the one breaking forward and getting the goals. And he was obviously a Chesterfield fan, desperate to score against Mansfield. And I managed to nick 2 that day, so he wasn't the best pleased.
Chesterfield's Jamie Winter left Mansfield looking well short of the League Two status they lost last season. First, the Scottish midfielder's free kick found its way through. That was just after the half hour. Early in the second half, Lloyd Kerry showed commendable awareness to set up leading goal scorer Jamie Ward for his 11th of the season. And it was definitely all over 7 minutes later when Winter served up a bouncer that bowled out Mansfield to give Chesterfield their first home win in the FA Cup for 11 years.
And all your goals were kind of like that. Did you used to practice just thumping it from the...
No, I mean, to be fair, I've always been technically good striking the ball. And in all fairness, Nilly and Shinner especially, they used to get on to me for not shooting enough. But yeah, I've always been a good striker of the ball. So 9 times out of 10, if you've seen me scoring, it's come from a bit of distance.
and yeah, the 6-1 win at Exeter, which you touched upon. So that was second season that you were with us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was October time. So I think you're right when you said they were kind of unbeaten. So you scored in that. I think it was another one outside the box.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was bonkers, that game. I remember it at the time, like seeing the score coming through, and it was just a bit crazy.
I mean, I think I'm not 100% sure on our forum leading up to the game, but what I do remember was the fact that they were flying. I remember like a lot of focus was on how they were playing football and how they were kind of adapting this 3-5-2 formation, and their manager was getting all the praise for how they were playing football. So when we were going down there on a Tuesday night, you were kind of like, oh, this can go one or two ways. But it just so happened that was the night everything clicked for us. As I scored the first that night, I remember, and everything just fell into place. Like that, Jack nicked a couple. I think Wardy got a couple. Did Alan Goodall score the other one, I think?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I think Goody got the other one, and then Daz Curry comes off the bench and scores. But we really, I think we caught them off guard. As I say, a few times they tried to play out from the back, and we were like right up against them. You know, it's like with Jack and Wardy are chasing it when they're on it. 9 times out of 10, if they were playing, we would get the win. And it's not if they weren't playing. If we were able to give them the ammunition, then we had a great chance. And it just so happened that night everything clicked into place. And that's the frustrating thing, because when you see us giving a team that go up, they went up promoted. I think they were second that year with kind of good lot of points. When you see them going up and we're giving them that kind of result, it's hard pill to swallow.
And when you're playing in a match like that where you're kind of cruising, I suppose it can go two ways, can't it? You can have some players that can either take the foot off the pedal and just kind of enjoy it, play a few Hollywood balls around, or you can do the opposite and you can think, right, we'll keep the hammer down and see if we can score 10 or something. What was it like, that match? Was it a case of keep the hammer down?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You've got characters like Jack Pagey and Kev Austin and like you say, Daz Curry. They were the experienced pros, and they were, like you say, keep the hammer down. They weren't wanting to go down there. As the whole build-up, as I say, everything was spoke about Exeter being how good they were. So if we'd have went down there and won 2 or 3-1, yeah, it would have been seen as a good result for us. But nobody probably would have took much notice, and they would have just moved on and carried on doing what they're doing. But they, as I say, they characters in the team, you were never ever getting your foot off the pedal. I remember Kev Austin that night, and like you say, I remember taking the ball from the back and trying to hit a World Cup volley pass 50, 60 yards to Jamie Lowry, and it just went out. And I remember Kev Austin barking at me to, like, we're not going wide, we're going for a goal. I think we're 4-1 up at the time. And I'm saying, Kev, like, he's like, we're going for 5, and then we're going for 6. Like, they were the characters we had in the team. And it was, as I say, it was a special night. Unfortunately, there wasn't social media the way it is now. So when we were sitting on the bus, it wasn't until the next day we were able to see the highlights and stuff.
And what did you have on the bus home? Was it DVDs and pizza or something?
Yeah, I don't even remember. We used to get. I don't even think it was DVDs. I can't even remember. A lot of the boys used to have like laptops, and if you got stuck next to Peter Leaving on the bus, he was just always watching The Sopranos. He thought he was in The Sopranos. So, or you get stuck listening to Big Fletch. Well, Fletch was there at the time, but. Yeah, no, on the buses, they used to get some pizzas in, but I can't even remember if we were allowed a beer there. But we snuck a cheeky beer in for a 6-1 win.
And I wanted to mention the Droylsden saga, because we spoke to Jamie Lowry about this, of which and I think he played in most of them, and you played in most of them as well. I think maybe you missed one of them or something like that, but
I think I played in the first one.
Yeah. I mean, that was just bonkers, wasn't it? The whole thing.
So we play the first game, and we're getting beat at half time, I'm sure. And then the fog comes down. And I remember us coming out to the kind of tunnel area, and you couldn't see 10 yards in front of yourself. So the referee calls it, but their manager's going bananas. He's going absolute bananas because they're 1-0 up. They're thinking they've got a chance. We play the replay on the Tuesday, and we draw 1-1. So it's a replay back to their place. I didn't play in the replay game. And I remember we're 3-0 up. I think Dan Curry's run riot that night. I remember being 3-0 up and floodlight failure. And you're like, this can't be happening. Surely not. Like, so then we go back and we play then the replay of the replay, and we get beat 2-1. And we genuinely leave the ground, go home that night, thinking that's it. And it's not till the next morning we get a phone call. You have to come into the ground like we're through. And I can't really remember how it came about as to who caught it and whatnot, but the guy that had scored 2 was ineligible, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a guy that had been red carded, I think, for something, and was meant to be serving a suspension or something like that.
I'm sure somebody on our part picked up the fact that, wait a minute, he's played Saturday and got red carded, and then I'm sure it's the guy that scored. Then that was it. We went through and played Ipswich in the next round and got a lovely day out.
Yeah, and there's 2 questions that I asked Jamie Lowry, so it'll be interesting if you give the exact same answers. But in the first one, where Jack Lester scored the pass back, did he mean to score?
I would say yes.
Yeah,
I think that's just the way Jack was. It was one of the ones where he's 20, 30 yards out from goal. I still think to this day that Jack would argue that we shouldn't have let them score. That's the way Jack was. Jack's a winner, and regardless, it was win at all costs with Jack, and I love that about him. And I remember it being a bounce ball, and if he didn't want to score, you would have just rolled it back into the keeper's hands. But fair play to him, you checked the keeper and you got a goal.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I was there, and it was just hilarious. I've never heard the crowd just laugh rather than.
Yeah, it was. I was on the park for that, and I remember, like, thank goodness for like Kev Austin, God rest his soul, because he was throwing Droylsden players all over the place because they were desperate to get to Jack.
It's like wrestling.
Yeah.
And the other question was, did Droylsden turn off their own floodlights?
My guess again would be yes. It wasn't until later on we found out, like, I'm sure their manager was also their chairman, and it was a very strange setup. But yeah, I mean, we'll never have any proof, but there's 10 minutes to go, and if, it would be interesting if they were 3-0 up if the floodlights would have went off.
Yeah, totally. I think we can lay that to bed now, because you've answered exactly the same way as Jamie Lowry did, so I think everyone would probably answer the
Did
same.
Jamie Lowry tell you that me and Peter Leven took him up to an Old Firm game?
No.
Yeah.
Go on, tell me more.
We've got tickets, and it was me, Peter, Phil Pickin, Steve Fletcher, and Jamie Lowry. We managed to take them up, but it was a Tuesday night game, and we managed to take them up for an Old Firm game.
And what was that like? Was it?
Yeah, it's good. We had Ped, Pix, and Jamie Lowry sat the opposite side with three tickets together, and I sat with Big Fletch. I remember it was like a Tuesday. We played a bounce game against Middlesbrough, so we all drove up, and then we went straight up to Glasgow for the Old Firm, and then drove back the next day.
Nice. And what were your memories of Saltergate at that time? 'Cause obviously it was a cool ground. It was a bit dilapidated, and like training facilities, like you mentioned, you had to travel quite a long way just to get to training to and from the ground. What are your memories just of what that ground was like?
I mean, the ground itself was obviously it was old and whatever it had, but from a pitch point of view, playing on it, I always enjoyed the pitch. The pitch was always in really good condition. But like my dad and his friends, 7 or 8 of them, they used to come down every 5-6 weeks to the games, and they used to love it, like standing in the coppers, whatnot, and like a proper football ground, eh? And I remember, like, obviously the second year we came back for pre-season, and we were doing some testing on the park, and we came back and it had been painted this ridiculous green colour, but they'd obviously been filming the damned United. I remember saying to like Jim and all that, and the club, like, we're going to need to get this sorted. I'm not playing about with this horrible green colour. But no, as I say, pitch-wise, I loved it, and it was a cool old ground. That's probably one of the other things that I regret, is the fact that I never had the chance to then see it. I've never seen the new stadium.
Oh, you'll have to come down and see it. It's nice, but it's obviously a lot different to Saltergate, and being on top of the hill when the fog came down was just always good fun. Was the characters around the club as well that you remember? Because there's obviously people like the chairman at the time, and Jeff Hall, and
Jeff
people like that.
Yeah, Jeff was in all the time. And again, we'll go back to people who would let you know about Mansfield games and stuff. Like there's guys like him who would be sitting in the physio room if you were maybe injured. They would be giving you stick and what's wrong with you, really? Come on, like. And the characters were amazing about the club. Even Tina, the photographer, she was always amazing. I was away from home at that time, like quite a young lad at the time. So there was people at that club that I couldn't thank enough. I mean, Shane Nicholson, he was like a big brother to me. I can't speak highly enough about that man and everything he'd done, because going back to the whole Lee Richardson thing, as I say, he used to play a lot of psychological games as such. I always remember, like, he would phone me and say things. 5 minutes later, Shinner would phone me and we'd have a proper conversation, because Shinner would be in the office at his end and he would see what I was feeling. So he would maybe be like, that's maybe not the way to approach it. And he would then leave the office and he would call me up, and then we'd have a proper conversation, and he would never lie to me. He would be honest, if you're not doing enough or you need to do this to play. But it was more on my level of understanding what was required to play or to be right. So, like, as I say, I still keep in touch with him now. I love the man. But these characters, as I say, there was a lot of them, but they were all just a link in the chain of making Chesterfield the special club that it is.
And what was your order at Linda's sandwich shop?
Used to get an omelette on a roll. Yeah, and then to be fair, one time Gregor Robertson's dad managed to send us down. We get Lauren sausage up in Scotland, which is like square sausage, and Gregor actually walked down to Linda's and pleaded with her to cook this square sausage. So the whole club got lawn rolls on Gregor. That was like being back home. It was great.
Square sausage.
So it's lawn roll, yeah. Square sausage, yeah.
Is it like in pastry or is it
No,
sausage?
it's just like it's just sausage meat, but it's square. We call it in Scotland lawn sausage, and it's just basically square sausage. So like Gregor's dad must have been down visiting him, and he basically brought down this slab of square sausage, and Gregor walked down into Linda's and got us to cook it one day for us.
They may be a mid-table side at the moment, but few clubs in the division have a better away record than Chesterfield. They've picked up more points on the road than at home and took the lead at Chester when Laurie Wilson diverted the ball past his own goalkeeper. Chester were level early in the second half. Damien Mazika's well-placed header, his second goal of the season. But 2 goals in quick succession gave Chesterfield all 3 points. Jamie Winter restored the lead with 13 minutes left. And then Lloyd Kerry added the third. His shot took a big deflection and looped over goalkeeper John Danby. Martin Gritton made sure it had crossed the line, but seemed to accept it was Kerry's goal.
Kind of getting to the end of your Chesterfield time now. So what kind of, and obviously at that time we had 2 years of not quite in the playoffs. So did you kind of get the sense that there was going to be kind of a bit of change in the club and that maybe you wouldn't be kept on?
Yeah, I think there was maybe there was a few games to go, and I remember I got an eye injury. I burst my head against, I think it was Barnet at home, and basically from that point of coming out of the team, they brought Lewis Montrose in on loan, and I really struggled to get back in from that point. And what probably didn't help me was the fact that the club were probably running down Lee Richardson's contract, so nothing was really getting kind of looked at beyond that. So I kind of packed up my things, came up the road, and then in hindsight, I don't know, all the players were phoning us when John Sheridan got the job, and Downsies and all that phoning me and saying, you would love him, you would love this, like the training, everything that he's looking for a player is you have to come back, you have to come on trial and whatnot, but you're young, you're proud, you don't want to be like the one making the first contact, whatever. But yeah, just through football reasons and kind of running its course, that was me. I left, but nothing but good memories.
And then you've played for quite a few kind of Highland football teams and things like that since, which I imagine is really picturesque. I imagine like every football ground's on like the top of a mountain or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there must be some good tourist grounds for any football fans that wanting to see a bit of football.
Yeah.
They're really picturesque. Where should we go and watch football?
Well, I mean, if you were ever coming up, you should come up with. I play now for my brother-in-law's team. I kick about on a Saturday with the Carnoustie Juniors, and as I say, the golf courses. You've got St Andrews, 10 minutes away. It's lovely. It's windy a lot and it rains a lot, but no, you as I say, just back to kicking a ball and normal life now. Work away, travel to work and kick a ball at the weekends. Is what it is.
Yeah, and like one of the favourite friendlies always for Chesterfield fans is at Matlock, and obviously all the fans love that just because it's so picturesque. So yeah, I mean you're only 35, are you?
Yeah.
So I imagine you've still got a few years then, have you?
I don't know.
Bit of a kickabout.
Yeah, as I said, I'm enjoying. I played as juniors here, we call it, but I would imagine it's like semi-professional down in England. So it keeps us relatively fit. I would love to play I genuinely enjoy playing football, so I would love to play as long as I can in some capacity. I've not really thought anything other beyond that regards coaching or anything. I've got a son now, so he's at the age where he's starting to play football. So I'm kind of hoping that that'll coincide with when I finally stopped. He'll be of an age where I can then fully focus on going to watch him if that's what he decides to do.
Yeah. And you work for a really interesting. You're patron for a really interesting charity now, aren't you? Back on side. So tell us a bit more about that.
So. Basically about maybe 2 years ago now, the charity had come in and done some work with our club, basically going around dressing rooms, and doing meet and greet talks just to let people know that there is help out there for any mental health help they would need. But I just felt that I could maybe use my my help and the people I know, if I could get the word out there a wee bit more. So I came up with the idea or campaign of, for every win that our Carnoustie team had, I would donate £10 to the charity. And through word of mouth, it spread, and within maybe a day or two, there was 24, 25 teams who had agreed to do the same. And it was great to obviously get this money into the charity, but not only the money side of things, it was spreading the word. Because I think that that's the biggest thing in everything that needs to be helped, is that people know that there is help, especially through this charity. So basically from that, then done a fundraiser where I've done a fire walk, raised money to do a fire walk, and then we had a lot of things in plan for fundraisers which had kind of been put on the back burner because of COVID and the whole pandemic. But yeah, just basically use my platform to spread the word through social media and people I know and in the footballing world, to get it out there as much as I can. I personally don't feel like I do anything that's out of the ordinary that you wouldn't do to help someone or pass it on. But the team at Barkham-side, they have counsellors. Libby, the founder, is amazing in what they do. And like I say, the amount of people they help and the amount of the things they do is phenomenal.
Yeah, and especially for kind of younger men as well. It's mental health is just really important, isn't it? That it's something that we're obviously still evolving or trying to talk more about, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's what you're saying there, is being able to talk about it, or being able to say to someone, like, I'm struggling here. And as I say, I'll go back to like some people like Shinner. So Shinner obviously had demons of his own life, and I think he's seen things not in myself, but he knew that then, me being a young man, that's not what I needed. I needed maybe a wee bit of comfort. And it was just wee things like phoning me up, are you okay? Like, we'd have a chat, we'd maybe have an argument, but it's just knowing that there's no harm in saying to someone, I'm struggling here, or I could do with a help. And like you say, it's just getting that word out, and the more people that know that there's help there, hopefully, the more people that will get help.
Yeah, well, we'll share the details for it so that people can check out and see more about it. So yeah, finally, I just wanted to know what was if you had like a top highlight while you're at Chesterfield. Obviously, you've got kind of Mansfield derbies, and you've got 6-1 away wins, and floodlights being turned off, and getting booked after 9 minutes, all that kind of stuff. Did you have like a top highlight during your 2-year seasons at the club?
Obviously, like, when I enjoyed the cup game, so even like getting to play at the first season, we got to play at Bramall Lane in the cup. That was good. Then obviously the season after, getting to play Ipswich away, which is funny because we got beat 3-0 from Ipswich, but I genuinely come away from that game thinking we could have got a result here. I'm pretty sure we were depleted a bit with injuries, but yeah, nothing but fond memories. One of my favourite games with Chesterfield was a 1-0 home win against Rotherham. I remember it being like a rainy day, and again, I think they were on a bit of a run, and the stands were packed. It was a really good atmosphere, and we'd done really, really well. And it was 0-0, and I remember Alan Goodall scoring a header at the back post. Literally, I think there was maybe like 5-10 minutes to go, and just that feeling, it was a really good feeling, and I think that kicked on a wee run. But that's probably one of my favourite games. As I say, beating Rotherham 1-0 and getting that win was magic.
I was talking to one player, and he was saying that he'd listened to a podcast where they were talking about psychopaths, and they were saying how psychopaths can change characteristics just like that. And he was saying when he listened to it, he thought they're just explaining footballers, because he was saying that, and I've kind of found from doing this that everyone I've spoken to, they're all quite normal. And you expect footballers to be a bit, there's an image of what they're like, isn't there? But actually, everyone I've spoken to are quite quiet, quite normal. But then once you cross the white line, you just turn into animals.
Yeah, and as I say, I think that comes from the whole, especially at that level, we're fighting for win bonuses, we've got bills to pay, and if you want to go on a nice holiday, you've got to do well to get the bonuses. So, as I said, 3 points matter, and it all of a sudden becomes, I want to win this, and I'm not, and you're not going to stop me, and that's where arguments start. You know, I love when I see players arguing on the pitch. I love it because it shows me like they're at it. I'd much rather, as a fan, see players berating one another, wanting to win, as opposed to someone kind of just accepting, "Oh, I'm wrong, sorry," and then we'll get on with it. Like, it doesn't work that way.
And it's funny, really, because fans can be like that as well. Like, fans can be really normal, quiet, nice people, and then the minute they go into the football ground.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I think that's what we're seeing with this whole pandemic thing about how important football is. Like, everybody's kind of Saturday routine, whether it be yourself travelling down to a game, stopping into a pub, having a few pints with your mates, going to watch the game, and then coming home. People don't understand the release that they get from that, and how much they need it. As soon as it's taken away, and we've seen what football's like without fans this year, it's not the same.
And as a footballer, 3 p.m. Saturday is just...
that's what you want, eh? There's nothing better than that. All this, I've got an Old Firm to watch next Saturday, and it's a 4 o'clock start, so that's a wee bit better. But all this 12:30 kick-offs and 2 in the afternoon, it should be 3 o'clock or under the lights, one or the other, no problems.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Great, well, thanks for coming on.
No bother, Dave.